I am thrilled to bring Scott Wolter back today because Scott has been all over the internet except on my channel. And I'm so sad that I haven't seen Scott, but we had so much to cover last week. Scott, have you been following the LK99? Was that of any interest to you?
Yeah, how'd that turn out?
Well, so far we don't know. There was new reporting this morning that I won't even be able to talk to Brian probably till Tuesday about this, but new reporting this morning that one of the other labs found some superconductivity at, I think, 10K, 10 Kelvin, I think.
And 10 Kelvin? Well, that's practically absolute zero. I mean, I think
well, I know. So, but
anything at 10K is probably going to be superconducting.
But they found some. Okay. So I don't know. I didn't get a chance to really read it in depth. And by the way, I don't know what I'm talking about. I have to have Brian to, help me through all this. But anyway, that completely got my channel all, on that. And so that's why we haven't seen you in a while. But glad to have you here. This is Randy Kirk. We know you like Scott, but just tell us again. Hit like, hit subscribe, hit notify. And then, follow Scott at, I forget, see there, I've forgotten what you are on Twitter.
It's going ballistic 5, yeah.
Ballistic?
Twitter. Oh, X. It's X. It's X.
On X.
Yeah, you were so deep in the LK99, you missed the whole thing about Twitter rebranding itself to X.
X, formerly known as Twitter. All right, Scott, let's get into the Optimus news that's been happening while I've been away. First of all, apparently Google and the folks over at ChatGPT have both been making some kind of news with regard to robots. Talk to me.
Yes, so it's more of a humanoid robot update as opposed to an Optimus update. We had our Optimus update a few weeks ago after the quarterly, right. And of course, haven't heard a peep since then. I mean, lots of reports about Cybertruck. Well, I think what we know about Optimus is it's starting to show up in more and more places now in different showrooms. So it's not just in LA and New York and Shanghai and London, but there's like 2 in the Dallas area, 1 in Dallas, 1 in Plano, 1 in Troy, Michigan. And of course, my primary residence, which I'm not at right now, I'm spending the summer down here in Florida, has one. So it's like 10 miles from me. I could have gone there if I was in town, but no. And of course, there's none in the whole state of Florida. So there's 1 up in Michigan. There's 1 in Charlottesville, North Carolina. Evidently, 1 has just shown up in Canada.
Yes.
So it's like, don't they know all the Canadians are down here? They don't have to send it up, So they all come to Florida, but I guess in the summertime, they're up there.
But there's 1 coming to your neighborhood soon. So
eventually, what I think is happening is we have so many Tesla showrooms in Florida, they're fighting over it.
Oh, I see.
They probably just can't come to a decision who's going to get it. And it's like, no, you can't let Miami get it. It should be up here in Orlando. And Tampa's like, no way. And then St. Pete, wait a minute. Why are we always like the little brother here to Tampa? Give it to us. And Sarasota's like, well, wait a minute, we're kind of, no, they're not, it's just probably going on like that. So anyways, I mean, that's it. And it seems to be that the Optimi that are showing up is kind of the real deal. In other words, it's still the shell of it. But from a lot of the photographs I've seen, I'm pretty sure it's not an Optikin. It's not like some mannequin they put together to dress up and look like Optimus. It does seem to be made out of what are real parts. Oh. And if not, then the model maker is just incredibly good and skilled at doing it. Now, it doesn't, it's still obviously missing a lot of things. They're not going to waste a circuit board in there. They're not going to be putting batteries in there. The motors are just the empty hull. There's no armatures in there. You're not seeing any harnessing and like that. But from the kinematic structure, we can see that we can get a lot. And it was really nice looking at some of the photographs. Again, I'm just itching to be able to go and see one live myself. Yeah. Now, we don't know how much to read into everything. Of course, we're really good at just like reading the tea leaves.
Yes. Connecting the dots.
So
giving him a little...
connecting the dots, whatever, however you want to look at it. And to me, it's meant that if these are showing up in the showrooms, it means they're producing excess kind of or early production versions of different components. And rather than just tossing them in the bin, they're just kind of putting them together. And as we start seeing more and more of these showing up, it's giving us a better idea of where they are in the production run. or
Scott,
let's say in the design. Yeah.
all right, and or Scott, I just did a video this morning which nobody looked at because nobody cares about marketing. Every time I do a video on marketing, 12 people watch it. So if you haven't seen that yet, you should. Anyway, but this could just be marketing. I mean, they could be making these.
Oh, it is. It is.
And just
it is.
saying,
It's brilliant
we're
marketing.
going to put these babies out. It's like front running the product, front run it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's down. Yeah.
On many levels. I mean, not just Optimus itself, but just getting people into the Tesla showroom.
Yeah.
People who hadn't thought about going there or anything else. I mean, you talk about brilliant marketing. I mean, there was, the big scandal about the X sign when they put it there. It was just like over the weekend. And it was a bit offensive, and the people across there were complaining about that. But there's like really no intention of putting it on up there. And the whole idea was to cause this kerfuffle that ended up costing Twitter like $4,000 in fines.
Yes, right.
You can't buy that much publicity for $4,000. I mean, it's just like, and it's like, you knew everyone was just going to, turn it into clickbait and everything. It's like, come on, if you wanted to get that much attention out there and promote yourself, how much would that cost you on Facebook ads and Twitter ads and everything else?
So I have commonly called myself a little tiny Elon, a very little tiny Elon.
Yeah.
But I've done stuff like that on weekend sales for some of my clients where we just ignore the city and just put up the huge balloon over the top of the building, put up the searchlights, do all this stuff with no permits, with nothing else. Because what are they going to do? It's a 3-day sale. They're not even going to probably notice it by the time the weekend's over.
Until Monday. Yeah, then it's too late, and it's easier to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. I mean, that's sort of how it comes down to. But that's very clear. But the Optimus is a couple weekends ago, there was a Tesla event nearby, by one of the Tesla clubs, and there was a representative from Tesla there. And I just asked them all kinds of questions about the Tesla bot. When you're going to get it? What's he going to know? And I was asking where it's going to go. He says, "Oh, it's definitely going to go to the distribution center of the show. It's not going to go in the malls. The malls are too small." He says, like they don't get that much traffic there. So I think it's like, oh, that's where it's going to be. But guess where all the Optimists have been showing up? At the Tesla showrooms that are in malls, Every one of them is in a mall. And the one is at like the Somerset Mall, which is a pretty ritzy mall in Troy, Michigan. I mean, that's like one of the most upscale malls in the Metro Detroit area. And, which is a logical place to have Tesla. And then way up the road on I-75 in Clarkson is where the actual Tesla distribution and maintenance center is. And of course, it's not there because the only people that go in there is that pick up their Tesla. That's it. And it's like in the northernmost fringe of the Detroit suburbs, whereas Troy is like, it's kind of the heart of the suburbs where everyone's going to be coming on in. And that makes sense. And so you go into that mall, sometimes not just to shop, just to have a pleasant afternoon, because it's just kind of nice to walk around. Christmas time, the decorations are just like, they literally spend $1 million a year to decorate that place. I mean, the stuff that they put in there is just amazing. And the Tesla bot's a draw. So people are coming there. And you could see, and from a couple of the pictures that I was seeing that was taken that Chris from Dirty Tesla did, is that you would see people were walking by and sort of their heads were turning when they saw it there. And like, there probably people weren't even thinking of going into the Tesla showroom. And now suddenly, oh, what's that? Yes. So it's drawing. And the other thing it's going to do is like the local news stations are going to cover that.
Every time. Yes, absolutely.
They're just, because they're just dying for like anything to put in 11 o'clock, And the other thing is like the Somerset Mall is one of those that they advertise a lot. So you are always seeing something in the local news kind of referring to that, because there's like, they're benefactors one way or the other.
Right.
And so just the mall themselves are like, they're going to call up some of the local stations. Like, you're going to come down here and cover it. I mean, we just want you to do it because this news story is going to drive the mall traffic. So I mean, and what does that mean about all the Tesla's neighbors down there? All the other stores, they love them because, wow, guess what? All the foot traffic is coming. It's called an anchor, right? Malls have anchors for a reason.
Scott, we're spending so much time on marketing that we're gonna turn this into another sleeper. Yeah. We've buried the lead about as far as we can bury it. What in the world is going on with Google and what's going on?
Okay, so what's all that? Okay, so there was a paper I think about 2 weeks ago that Google Brain showed on some of the developments they've had with the different learning models, and they've renamed the learning model to like a visual learning model. And the way to be able to to teach the Google robot, which is not a very fancy robot as far as, the mechanics. It's not a humanoid robot at all.
Right.
However, it has the characteristics that you would want for, let's say, a household robot, or robot that could do simple chores. So first of all, it has an arm, but it's an arm much bigger than a human arm. It's about 1.5 times the size. So it's got a little bit more reach because it only has one. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have a full torso or body, and it doesn't walk, but it's on a mobile platform. So it's wheeled. So it is mobile, it's able to get around. And it has a head and has the cameras and everything else, so it can see. It has a very simple gripper. It doesn't have fingers, but it has something that can open and close. So it's like as rudimentary as possible. But basically, it checks all the boxes as far as what you would need. Right. I need vision, I need mobility, I need a gripper, and I need an arm. Okay. And the arm is designed, it's definitely, it's certified cobot, meaning that, it actually goes through a certification test to be able to tell whether it's safe to be around people or not. And so it's designed that way. And they've been teaching it how to do a lot of these operations for, I think, the past 2 years or so. Just very simple things in an office space. I think it started out with sorting the trash, what goes into recycling, what goes in this and that, and learning how to do some things around the kitchen and just be kind of helpful. And they've been doing more and more tasks trying to teach it. And that was using a training model they called RT1, which is, I think, Robotic Transformer 1. And then they have now come up with their second generation on that. And with the visual learning model, they've been able to teach a lot of these tasks just by using videos from the web. And it also now has sort of a natural language interface that you just sort of tell it what you want it to do, and it goes ahead and does it. And the big thing is that they've discovered sort of emergent behavior. So what's emergent behavior? Well, it's very simple to, teach a robot these different tasks. So you show it how to do this thing, that particular task, and you ask it to do it, and it will know how to do it. And you can show it a different one, something else. But at some point, if it learns enough tasks, you might be able to ask it something that's not in its repertoire.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's figures out, oh, I think this is what you mean. And it's it ends up doing that. So it ends up doing something it was not taught in figuring it out. So that's rather interesting, in that it means it's very much like chat. Because, chat, you give a simple prompt, and if it wants, it can be very verbose.
Right.
And so if you just give chat a simple prompt of bake bread, it will give you the whole recipe on this is what you'd have to do. These all the steps you have to do to bake bread. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of almost the same thing would be happening here, is that you could tell it to do something and you don't have to break it down all the different tasks. It was going to figure it out. And I think they call it, what is it? It's like a chain of conscience that it's able to go through to build up these different steps.
Yeah. So let me summarize real quick, because, sometimes you get ahead of me because I'm, not a scientist. So there's two pieces of news here, one of which shouldn't be terribly surprising to folks who really follow Tesla, is that they are now not just feeding in video from simulation, they're feeding in video from the internet, just a YouTube video
on the web. Yep. YouTube videos
on how to bake bread. And then that video is in some way able to partially or somewhat train the bot to be able to do things. And this would be a significant breakthrough in terms of the way anybody would train a bot, or a car for that matter.
Right.
And that would be significant. And then part two would be the idea, and you're saying that maybe even a bigger, more significant breakthrough would be that, like ChatGPT, it seems to be able to infer or extrapolate or interpolate or bring two things together and combine them in order to learn a third task that wasn't even intended.
Right. Now, it seems like this was Google, so they already built it on one of their LLMs they already had out there, and then, added the vision component to it. So it already had, sort of a certain understanding of language and maybe how the world worked from the original training set it had. And then they added a little bit more. And from it was able to really get an understanding of how things behave in the world. And then one of the things that was important is, because they were getting into vision, is this whole idea of tokenizing things. So large language models work in the idea of tokens, and tokens is just a fancy way of saying words, breaking it down that way. Or if you want to even, smaller chunks or pieces might be letters. So it's a way of discretizing the whole problem and then understanding how it all goes together. And when it comes to a vision model, the tokenization is kind of what we call labeling. But I think it goes a little bit beyond that, because labeling tends to be a very human intensive thing. You got to go through and point out this is what it is. And the idea is a lot of them will start to see these videos and understand what it is they're seeing and kind of figure those things out themselves. So that's part of the input, and it just synthesizes everything and now has a really good idea of what's going on in the world. So if you give it very simple instruction, it will sort of figure it out based on what it's seeing. So the vision model has to be really good at breaking down the environment into different semantic elements that it needs to understand and to know what's important and what's not.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when we see a scene can be very busy, but you have to kind of focus on what's important in the scene.
Yeah.
And if I ask you to describe a scene, you ask me to describe a scene, we're going to describe it very differently. So, I mean, that's part of what you got to think is that, if you're an author, right, and you want to describe something, you sit there and with language, you like develop this world and you describe in the detail of what something might look like. And you make sure that you leave behind enough evidence that, if it's a detective novel or something like that, there's some key piece of information. And so something will be described and you'll get an image in your head. And so the same thing is they want, when you're looking at a vision system, or when you're looking at it, is to be able to take all those elements and sort of break them into an internal language and what's there. And sometimes you can get too much detail into a scene. And it's just a question of what's important. So, the important elements is like, especially what the robot is doing, is there's a table and there are objects on the table. Okay, now, is it important for it to get down to the details that, well, what kind of a table is it? Is it a wooden table? Is it a plastic table? Is it a metal table? Does it come from IKEA? Or does it come from, somewhere else? It's like, those are like details you don't care about.
Yeah.
And then, the objects might be, okay, there's a number of objects, but at some point you might want to break down, well, what kinds of objects are they? Are they fruit? Are they bowls? Are they pieces of paper? Or are they flags? Or something. So you would start breaking it down when it's important. So when we go and look at a room, we don't see all that detail. But as you start to prompt, if I ask you some questions about it, you begin to notice that. It's like, oh, I hadn't noticed that before, but yeah, I see exactly what you're talking about over there. And so that's what's important, is for it to be able to see that, break it down. And now that you've tokenized it, it's much easier to be able to come up with, a way of solving whatever is the problem that's put in front of it. And that's, of course, the same way the LLM works, is that we give it a simple phrase and it just operates on that. It's not operating on everything that's out there. It's keeping focus on what the question is.
Now, Scott, do we know or assume that the Google version, and we'll talk about OpenAI in a minute, but do we know or assume that the Google version is in fact also getting language information from these videos? And
it probably already had it. My understanding is that they've already built something from like the large language models. And then so it probably already has that as a starting reference point. And then the videos may have language in it. It may know how to break that down. So somehow all that's coming in there.
Well, that would
I'm not sure if it's, I think it's still text-based, so that when they ask it to do something, they still might be typing something in. There's no reason why you probably could not do it with voice command. It's just that everyone knows voice command sometimes is not very precise.
I'm thinking that if it's watching a video,
yes,
and it's not only getting the visual information, but it's getting a voice
probably is
information at the same time, then that's going to help to say, I'm teaching you how to bake this loaf. Well, it's a lot better if I've got both visual and verbal at the same time. Yeah.
And so it might be something, because it's a good question is whether there's a lot of captioning going on in those videos to help out, or whether it's doing it itself. Right. It might be listening and capture it now. I've got the text and break down, and you can see a lot of those auto captures. They're okay, but they also have like a lot of errors in it, and so you got to kind of wonder, we're kind of training it like really, the grammar is wrong and the words wrong. It's like, but at some point, I guess it kind of is able to figure it out, what's right and what's wrong. Now, the examples that they had of the emergent behavior is they would give a very simple prompt. So they had one example of, a table, and there were 3 bowls on the table, and 2 of them were had a fruit already in them, different fruits. And then there was some strawberries off on the side. And the command was just put the strawberry in the correct bowl.
Yeah.
Okay. So now it's like, well, what's the correct bowl? Well, it's the empty bowl, or the bowl that doesn't have strawberries in it. And then you just kind of start putting it in there. So they had a lot of other examples like that. One of them where they had a couple of plastic animals that were on the table and said, pick up the, I think it was like the non-ocean animal, the not sea animal. And there was like an octopus and maybe a horse or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it knew, you mean for me to go ahead. And it was able to sort of figure that out. Now, the movement wasn't necessarily the best. Sometimes when it tried to grip, it would fail in the grip and everything like that, because it probably hasn't quite figured out the best way to move the gripper, because it was pretty clear. A lot of it was just positional error, trying to grab something. So if you had like a pencil like this, we know that's the way to grab a pencil. You don't try to grab it like this.
So
you
yeah,
just
so,
ask.
so yeah. Scott, the question there would be: are they really that interested yet in a robot?
Yeah.
Or are they really more interested in?
They were interested in the visual. They were interested in the other. Now, the thing I'm trying to figure out is like how much of this is like really a big breakthrough, and how much of it is more of a carnival trick, because in a way it's connected to the robot, and we're very impressed that the robot's moving around, but it almost seems to me like maybe it doesn't even have to be connected to the real mechanical arm.
Yeah.
Because it's no different than if you described a scene to ChatGPT and you were able to tell, so this is what you see right now in the environment. This is what's there. And now I'm going to give you this prompt.
Right.
Which bowl would you put the strawberry in? Oh, the empty one. It's like, yeah, but all you're now seeing is actually putting in the empty one, and you're all amazed. So its answer is what it's doing. And of course it's driving some of the other things out. So what I think is going on here is it's not quite end to end yet. So some of the output from this LLM is like positional data, which they put into a token. And basically the positional data is just a delta from where it currently is. So it kind of knows that I'm right here, and it knows its goal is over here. And it says that in order to get to my goal, maybe 1/100th the way, you need to kind of do this. And it keeps on incrementally doing that. And as it's doing, it's going to be checking that it's sort of moving towards the goal. And if for some reason, whatever you gave it is making it do this, it'll say, oh, no, kind of correcting yourself over there. So that seems to be what the outputs are to get it to go over as it manipulates and tries to open and close the gripper, so it can make a decision whether that's progressing well or not. But to me, it seems like you've already got what was probably at the low level, some sort of control system that's based on, it's heuristic at that point. You're basically giving it a target location, and it's breaking it in there, figuring out how the motors are supposed to move. And then, from the visual, it seems like you're looking at it, and it's probably creating into this text-based language that gets an output from the LLM and goes off to something else. And I'm just like, why don't they just have like a full end-to-end?
Yeah.
Which is not quite there. That you see the visual input, and the thing just kind of moves because it's got this natural sensor going there. So it doesn't mean that it's not impressive to some level, but there are others that are doing it, and there's a couple of companies that are just starting to play in that space of being more end to end. And I know one of the startups out there that's doing it is Orangewood, and they seem to be, they're a complete startup. They had to create their own robot. And so they had the luxury, because they were creating their own robot, they had to, come up with a control system. And rather than having a traditional control system, they're like, oh, that's just going to be part of our neural net. And so they're making that pretty much, this is the input we want, and then you're just going to go there. So that's going to be the way, just as we've also heard that, George Hotz has been comma AI. It's like, oh, end to end's been the way to go. And like suddenly Elon's like, yep, it's going to be end to end. We agree. That's the way it's going to be going forward. So you're going to see more of those things, because that's what really gives you the more natural movement on your bots. Okay.
So OpenAI famously a few weeks ago said that they were not going to do robots I mean, this has only been
Well, yeah, I think that was like a quite a while back.
okay.
So before chat, it was just, and then I think there was like some old interview with Ilya that was like, wow, if we were going to do it, we'd need like 10,000 bots.
Yeah, yeah.
And then once ChatGPT came out and a lot of these other things, they sort of said, whoa, wait a minute, we're thinking we should get the bot. And so they went out and they, I'm not sure if they bought or just invested into a Norwegian startup that, well, I don't know if it's necessarily a startup anymore. I think they've been around since 2016 working on things. And this is the 1X bot. And yeah.
Now, and once again, is it important with regard to even OpenAI as to what the vehicle is that they're putting it into? Or is the important thing the fact that OpenAI has also now stated that they're working with video input and video training that could be off the internet or simulations or whatever, but it's a video-based training system. To me, that seemed like maybe, again, the most important part of the story. But again, you know way more about the story than I do. So help us.
And again, trying to embody the AI. So it's not living just like in a computer somewhere, but it now has the ability to interact more with the world. And so to see the consequences of what it's like picking things up and then train itself that way. So they decided to do that. And this company has had a humanoid-like bot that's been able to do quite a few, has two arms and a head that moves around. They started out with more traditional kind of robotic gripper that was on there, and a certain amount of mobility that didn't have full legs because it would go around on wheels, but they had the legs that would allow it to kind of at least go up and down so you can get that movement. And now the next version, I think the bot they're going to call is Neo. That looks like a humanoid bot, but it's a render that looks like, wow, it's really good, just like the original Tesla bot render was very impressive. It's like, wow, that looks like a human. And this one does too, except it looks more like a human in a tracksuit, because they're looking to having the covering, because it's very clear you're going to have some sort of metallic or some sort of very hard thing underneath, and cables and everything else, and you want to make sure that they're not going to get in the way. So they're already looking at the covering is going to be on there. But some of the big differences between what we've already seen and what it shows are two. One is legs. I mean, so it's like, oh, they're going to walk, and it really, the legs look pretty good, and what you see the feet is like, it almost looks like, I wonder if they're going to have like a full blown foot model there. And then the fingers, it's like, you're like, wow, now suddenly went from a simple gripper to they have hands. So they're thinking that's going to be very important. And it may be that they can do the hands pretty quick. And I wonder which hands they're thinking of using, because it was OpenAI that did the hand for the Rubik's Cube. Yes. And I keep on questioning, well, where is that hand? What happened to, Thing? Where'd Thing go? Because they got to bring them back. So they're finally going to start putting that thing, on there and see if it can do the Rubik's Cube connected to an actual humanoid bot. So that's going to be interesting to see what they're able to get out of that.
All right. So ultimately,
and again, so the race is on. Really, it's the brains that I think is where the race is.
Right. And ultimately, I want to come back a little bit to the form, of these various, and where the race might be on in terms of the mechanical beast itself. But I felt like what was more important is that obviously Tesla has Dojo. It has massive amounts of video training apparatus that they've already been working with for months. And with all that's happened with ChatGPT and OpenAI over the last several months, I'm guessing that the team at Tesla has not been sleeping on that information, but rather... No, they haven't. So one might surmise, again, connecting dots. Wouldn't Tesla at this point probably be way ahead on this idea of using internet video and or whatever kind of simulations and trying to get a deep learning video system going, not just for Optimus, but also for the cars? Is that really the secret sauce that we're waiting for?
Yeah, they've already been doing that with the cars for,
Yeah.
for years. So they've been learning on video. They know how to assimilate video in, and they've had a lot of false starts.
I was talking about
And
this idea, but I meant the idea of the learning where it starts to actually extrapolate, interpolate, etc., as opposed to just.
Okay, yeah. So hopefully, yeah, that's going to be interesting to see what kind of emergent behavior they get in FSD. Hopefully not. I want my car to do what it's, really. I mean, sometimes it might have to get creative. You get into, some weird situation where, some accident's about to happen, and maybe it finds a really novel way to kind of get out of it.
Right.
Most of that emergent behavior, you'd hope it's in there. But, the first thing is to be able to bring in video and to use that as a training corpus, which is very different than just bringing in text. So they know how to do that, and they've probably changed how they've done it a couple of times. So they're definitely, on top of the game. There's no sunken cost fallacy at Tesla, that if they take an approach and they realize they're not getting further and they see something else, they will quickly pivot and go ahead and do that. So they do that again and again. So I'm pretty sure they're there. Elon kind of, I don't know if he let the cat out of the bag, or whether that was intentional when he mentioned about the Tesla AI, which referring to the large language model that Tesla has. So it sounds like they have something internal anyways, which would make sense. I think not just only for FSD, but clearly for Optimus.
Yeah.
And the way we think it has to be trained is that we think they also need to have that large language model behind it to do the same thing that Google was doing, and probably OpenAI and everyone else. So they've got one for that. They know how to take the video, and it's just like repetition on top of that, and then realizing that they are the car and the bot are two different things. Yeah. You interact with the world a little bit differently, and the output requirements are going to be a little bit different. But and I think, again, going back, it's probably not even a year ago, but it just seems like all these different AI days. They talked about this idea of the I think it was like the language of the lanes, or the grammar of the lanes that they had, that they used a large language model to be able to do that. So again, the idea is taking a traffic problem and tokenizing it. That's what that was all about.
Right.
Is figuring out how they could tokenize it so they could use it in a large language model to come up with an understanding of how to solve that particular problem. And I'll tell you, that's exactly the same problem that you're talking about. It's like, I've got a bunch of objects on the table in front of me, and you're going to break those things down to tokens and understand it. And what are the rules we're going to have? And it figuring out it on the fly. So that tells me they have that infrastructure is there, and they are probably using it. So I don't think in any way that it's like they're behind.
Right.
They probably are doing the same thing. They could be ahead, but I'm pretty sure they're not. They're at the same level at least.
So one thing that we know that the internet is filled with, because I would say, or the YouTube is filled with, or any of the video setups, the Vimeo, etc., is lots and lots of how-to videos. In fact, I've spent probably a huge amount of time on those how-to videos in order to fix things around the house. So wouldn't that almost be like the ideal thing? Feed in millions and millions and millions of how-to videos in order to get the bots to be trained up really quickly.
Yeah, and what's so funny is when you think about it, is that life imitates art. And do you remember Short Circuit?
I do.
And Johnny Five, and what was his mantra constantly? Input, need input, need input, need input. Wow. All he did was he just watched TV all day.
Okay.
And it was from that he was able to understand kind of what was going on around him, and picked it up. And then he became a smart aleck because he just consumed way too much stuff.
Right.
But I mean, think about it. That movie was like 1985, I think. 85, 86. And, it was pretty much spot on that, it's like you're going to get this mechanical bot that, has some kind of brain, but, the neural net that's functioning but doesn't know anything. And of course, they're just looking, it's like, well, children learn by looking. It's like, we got to speed it up somehow. Well, that's exactly what machine learning is. is you just keep on feeding. And of course, you remember he was sitting there late night TV, which most people don't remember, but it was like filled with all kinds of stuff. Do you think it's really important? But it was like old Julia Child cooking shows. So, at 3 a.m., he's always learning. It's like, oh, this is how you make this and this now. And all these other, do it yourself kind of stuff. And
it's kind of mind blowing. All right, let's talk about hardware for just a minute. Everybody that's watched you and me on this show multiple times, and you've probably seen you on other channels, and even me by myself trying my best to understand this stuff, is that Tesla is, of course, the greatest manufacturer probably in history. No, not probably. They're definitely the greatest manufacturer in history. You've already gone through step by step and shown that they can make all of these parts and make them better than anybody else, make them lighter, make them faster, probably make them cheaper. That it would take no time at all to get to where they were in mass production on every motor, every actuator, all the plastic parts, everything else. We've been down this path so many times, and that they started out with this product from the standpoint of making it manufacturable in mass quantities, where nobody else is on that. I mean, nobody else is making a full-on humanoid robot, or in the process that we know of, far enough along the way to make a manufactured product in scale, maybe in a few months.
Yes. Exactly. And they're moving along in that direction, because we've seen that they're hiring the different positions, and notice that they filled a couple of those positions. I'm not sure if the ones that were advertised, but we do know that they now have, I think, is a new VP for like manufacturing and Sparks.
It's not manufacturing.
There's just, I
manufacturing
think there were two people.
and construction both, or something. It's like
construction, something like for Sparks, but I think somehow responsible for it out there. And he comes from Eli Lilly, and I think he has a really strong background in project management and everything else. And I think they also brought in another person. It's sort of interesting to see he's coming from Eli Lilly, and not coming from automotive. And the reason I like that is Eli, they know about manufacturing, but it's a different kind of manufacturing. And it's high speed consumer kind of products, and pharmaceutical and these other things. So you're not looking for making like these huge giga castings or something like that. Things are a little bit smaller. And I'm looking at it's like, okay, I mean, I know they're doing something, they are doing the semi. Everyone's assuming, there for the semi was a little bit different kind of production. But if the bot is being made there, I mean, it's like, wow, I think he's got the pedigree for that. So it's like almost that's the kind of the person I would want to see that has that kind of background, that understands like the smaller components that kind of come together, and how you do that, how you do it on a smaller footprint, and a footprint that is something that you could probably then duplicate everywhere else.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of common. A lot of these manufacturers, they don't just have like one central place that they produce. They produce all over the place. Coca-Cola doesn't just produce in Atlanta. They're like, they're scattered everywhere.
Well, and I think
so you want to be the same thing.
Yeah. One of your earliest points was that if this thing is put together in the right way, you could construct it in your garage in half a day. So this is not something that
So you want to know how to clone it.
Yeah.
And I think looking at some of the close-up pictures of the Tesla, I mean, there were some reasons why I'm pretty sure that the bots that are out there are the real deal.
Oh, okay.
And not something that a model maker came up with.
Yeah.
And that is because there's almost too much detail. There are things that are on there that would have been like little shortcuts that if you were someone who was manufacturing that, unless you're just going to be super faithful to it. But it sort of shows me a lot of things that are going on that I think they're going to want to clean up on the final version. And I had to I can't remember where there were a couple of pictures. I have to go around and look at a couple of the close-up pictures that tell me that. Oh, there we are. Share the screen. Okay. So here we see a picture, and this is Chris McBob, also known as Dirty Tesla. So he sent a couple images that are there. And, one of my first comments, if you haven't seen it already, is that this is the reason why Optimus should never be put into a shopping mall. Because the first thing he will do is visit one of those kiosks that does body piercing. Okay. So, I mean, this is a rather interesting detail. I looked at it and wondered if it was there, and I went back to the original CAD images that they showed, and sure enough, there is kind of like a hole that's in here. I'm not quite sure what it's for because it doesn't appear to go through the other side. It looks like it's a locking pin.
Yeah.
But in some of the other motors, it looks like there clearly is a hole on this side and a hole on the other, and we can see there's something that's gone through, like it's meant to be a locking pin. But the thing that I've been looking at on here is that if you look at these motors now in the shoulder, these three motors are all identical motors. So that's the whole idea of the design,
right? Is
to make sure that the motors are identical,
right?
But the motors have to be mounted together in different orientations. And so this housing here and this housing here, they're identical housings, and they had to be bolted together. Because I was looking at some of these things and wondering like, oh, what's this thing? And every now and then you see these doodads kind of sticking out. And like, what's that there for? And it's like, well, basically, it's an artifact of the fact that these are all identical housings, that depending on the configuration, you may or may not need that. So, I mean, you will see some like, this mount point here, they're not using it. So why is it there necessarily? In this one, you see this little piece here, that flange that basically kind of matches up with something that would be over here to be able to come together. So, as you go around and look at these different pieces, you begin to wonder, this was like even worse. I was looking down here at like all this stuff that's sticking out and what that's there for. And again, it's for the various configurations these things would come together. So it seems to me that some of these things are a bit extraneous. And now, if you're the model maker, you might not be worrying about that. Again, this is kind of a weird thing. And there's like an image on the other side showing that actually sticking out on the other end, which rather surprised me. It's like, wait a minute. So that you actually can put that right through the armature or whatever as some sort of joint locking pin that you would remove after transit or something like that. So there is some detail. Now, it's these little protuberances here that really bother me. I mean, these are things that kind of hit things, that get in the way, that might injure someone when it goes by, because it's just kind of out there. And I'm just wondering if they're going to clean them up. So again, at first I thought, oh, that must be for cable routing or something like that. I'm like, no, it's not. It's because of different configurations of being able to put it together. So my thought is they want to have the different SKUs. They only want to make 6 motors.
Right.
But what the complexity of the motors are is not so much the housing, but it's the stuff that goes in there, the armature itself.
Sure.
And I'm almost wondering, why can't they just go ahead and cast this thing as a single housing?
Oh.
You just don't need all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, for, this one you can't because it's actually connected to the part that's moving around there. But somehow to me, it seems like, I wonder if you can just go ahead and then you clean that up.
Yeah.
You clean that up a lot.
Right. And have less processes, less parts.
Yeah. So there's definitely some interesting aspects of what could be done a little bit differently there. And, definitely get rid of the process, get everything else. You can get rid of a little bit of weight. Not that it's that big a deal here.
Yeah.
And then I'm wondering if there's some other things that you can build in internally that way, that if the two things are joined together, it might solve some of your cabling issues as well. You never know if you already kind of know it's going to go. So those might be some long-term things that they would do to clean it up, to get rid of that. And again, we just kind of see this is going on and on here. I think we have almost a similar situation down here. Or let me see, if not, let's see, I'm trying to think how that's connected on there. That's the body, because that's got to be moving it. But
generally speaking, Scott, I'm trying to figure out why they would use a model maker. I mean, if they're building these things, they're either if they're metal, they might be CNCing them one at a time. Or they might be 3D printing them. I mean, why would you have a model maker make them ever? It would seem like it would be smarter. It's like, do you know how much a model maker costs? Oh yeah, I know. That's my point. I don't know.
They're almost more expensive than the original.
Yeah.
And especially if you're going to be pumping a lot of them out. So every one of them could be pretty expensive, especially when you get down to the details. So again, there was some question about whether these things are the real deal. Now there is like a slight difference in that the feet we see down here are not consistent with the Tesla bots we see walking around. So we know that's different. But when I start looking at all the other things in here, they all line up.
I see.
They're pretty much the same. There may be some a little bit different in the hands, what to see, but all the other mechanisms, everything looks like it's there. The interesting thing is that if we go back to the Investor Day video, there were 3 bots in there.
Right.
2 of them were walking, one that was not. One of them was being assembled. And the one that was being assembled had these feet. Had these shins. And it's like, okay, are they learning to put together the Opticans? So I the thing I wonder is, are we going to find out that these things here were actually assembled by Optimus at some level? Who knows? It may have been the practice runs.
Indeed. And by the way, for the 3 of you out there that aren't putting it together, it's Opticans. So
Opticans, Optimannequins, yeah. Optimus mannequins, Opticans, yes.
Yes. I just wanted to make sure we made that clear.
Yeah. Portmanteau of those of Optimus and mannequin.
All right, let's just do a quick summary here. What we've learned is that the video deep learning idea is probably going to accelerate the ability of Optimus to be able to do multiple tasks. The fact that 2 other companies are now, at least 2 other companies, are in the business of looking at video learning as a methodology for doing this is extremely interesting. The fact that one of them has announced that the video learning that they're getting off the internet has allowed their robot to actually do tasks that were not expected, seeming to be able to learn from various things, put them together and be able to do something that was unexpected. That would be pretty significant in terms of Optimus and maybe cars within limits. And that all of this, at the end of the day, is not competition to Tesla for 2 reasons. And tell me where I'm wrong here. Number one, these other fellows don't seem to even really be heading for exactly the overall humanoid approach anyway. And number 2, there's going to be such a large TAM, it won't matter if there's lots and lots of people.
The market is so big, and it's going to be an expanding market. It just doesn't care. It doesn't matter. And the thing is, like, even if Tesla was like the only one out there doing it, once they started to get some amount of success, everyone else is going to say, we can do it too. And it's just going to, you never have like just one everyone's going to copy that and try to do it or come up with some variants on it. And again, because Tesla has been doing it, you are seeing that these other humanoid bot companies are either springing up, or let's say they're having more success in their 2nd and 3rd funding rounds. Because now everyone realizes, like, oh, wait a minute, we want to find a horse to back here. And so everyone realizes it can be done. And it's a question of how soon, and it just comes down to really what's going on with the AI and how quickly it can learn, and that we just don't know. It seems to be learning faster than everyone expected. So it means it could be here frighteningly quick, or it might still be that it's a couple years away, but it's clearly before the end of the decade. I mean, I know a lot of people saying we won't have like AGI or the singularity till like 2027 or 2028, whatever. I'm pretty confident by 2025 we're already seeing really competent, good humanoid robots doing useful activities. Whether it's in the home yet, I don't think so, but I definitely will be in industry that they will already be performing useful tasks.
Well, I think, and you and I've speculated, everybody probably knows our numbers and knows what our anticipations and expectations are. The reason I don't think they'll be in the homes has less to do with their capabilities in the homes, which might be surprisingly pretty good for some tasks fairly soon, like giving me my massage that I keep talking about. It's the only reason I want one, is to give me that massage. And but even if they had the capability to give me the great massage, and I was willing to pay $5,000 a month or something in order to lease that product to give that massage, then a factory would be willing to pay 6,000. I mean, there's the private use of it is years off because there's not going to be enough of them to satisfy the demand in industry, and industry is going to be way more willing to pay the bucks that are necessary to get it to.
Right. And the question comes down to what is going to be the limiting factor when it comes to producing the bots. How many can you produce?
Right.
And a lot of it might just come down to the FSD chip, which I assume they can produce in pretty big numbers and maybe scale up.
Yes.
But so we know they're able to produce a couple of million a year already. They're going to have to, and probably within the next, if they keep on 50% growth, then they're going to have to go to like 3 million next year and then 40. So the number, well, actually twice that, because isn't there 2 chips in there, or are they going with one and with hardware for them? Not quite sure, but they're producing quite a bit. And the only question is,
that's news. You just made news. I
don't know whether I think there's 2. I think there's 2 chips in hardware.
No, I'm talking about the limiting factor. The limiting factor could be
the limiting factor is going to be the chip. Yeah, probably
making motors, making actuators. I mean, you can.
It's still a lot of motors. It's still a lot of motors. But the question is whoever their supplier of that, if they suddenly say no, it's like, I know we talked about a contract that is going to be 3 million this year and then 4 million 5.
Right.
Now we need you to produce 50 million or 100 million.
Right.
That's going to suddenly stop things quickly.
But on
right
chips, there. But your point is the chips.
The FSD, the chip, the FSD chip. That is the one that, right now they're able to produce them pretty quickly. But as we found out, that there is a limit to how much you can scale up these semiconductors. And they're only producing so many at a certain rate, and everything is sort of already, the production is already sold out, years in advance of like how much you need to have for your particular ASICs or whatever you're having produced. And so I don't know that they could just like that say, oh, we want you to produce 100 million.
And if you got Ford and other companies coming in that want,
well, they're going to be producing. They're going to, the question is whether they're going to be producing their own or how. Yes, for Tesla. Yes. So, exactly. That's right. I forget about that. That suddenly they might have to double it, not for the bot. The motors are, Elon made it sound like it's the limiting thing right now, because the bot is consuming 40 motors per bot. So you have to produce a lot of actuators just for one bot.
Yeah.
And those are not, necessarily that simple. They can come up with a production line to be able to start pumping those things out when they need to. But even then, it's like so you want to do 1 million bots, you got to make 40 million of these actuators.
Right.
And then of course, you get all the parts that make up the arms and the legs and stuff like that. But those are usually things that you could crank out pretty fast and, scale that up if you have to.
Yeah.
But I would say, the first is going to be the chip. And then the second is going to be the rate that you can produce those motors.
All right, Scott, as usual, it's informative. It's fun. It is incredible to have you on here all the time. And I thank you for joining us today. You guys know what to do. You hit the like button, and then you hit the subscribe button, and then they hit the notify button, and then they go see you. And say it again, because I always forget what it is.
Going ballistic 5.
That's the part. Going ballistic.
Going ballistic. It's kind of, it's a double entendre of some sort in that it was, partly that maybe I rant every now and then, but also is because, kind of my love of space flight and stuff like that, and watching rockets going ballistic and everything. So it just,
maybe that'll help.
That's where it comes in.
Maybe that'll help.
Yeah.
All right, Scott. Thanks again for being on. And to all of you out there, as always, it's been great talking to you.
Click the link below to get your paperback, Kindle, or audiobook now.